All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're going to unpack something truly wild, the Origin Architect's proposal. And let me tell you, this is a story that starts in a very personal, spiritual place and ends with a plan that is designed to, well, reshape society as we know it.
Everything, and I mean everything, in this project boils down to this one powerful idea. This is the guiding light, the core philosophy that takes this from just an idea to an absolutely audacious mission. Burn this phrase into your memory, because we're going to come back to it.
So here's the big question we're tackling. I mean, it sounds kind of impossible, right? How on earth do you get from a personal prayer to a $110 billion proposal aimed at healing deep historical wounds? Well, let's follow the breadcrumbs and see how they did it.
So, our story doesn't start in some high-tech lab or a fancy boardroom. Nope, it begins with a quest for spiritual protection, a very personal need that just blossoms into something massive.
It all kicks off with the request for, and I'm quoting the source here, heavy artillery from Scripture. Yeah, you heard that right. The goal was to build what's called a spiritual shield, a defense against those kinds of threats you can't see, the ones that feel more spiritual than physical. It's a very real, very human place to start.
Now, what's really fascinating here is the approach. Look, this wasn't just about cherry-picking a few nice verses to feel better. No, they built an entire arsenal. I mean, look at this. You've got categories like spiritual shielding, which pulls from Psalm 91, and deliverance, using passages from the Gospel of Mark. It was like they were literally engineering a defense system from the ground up. And then this idea of protection gets personal. It gets woven into this really cool family story, an allegory about fighting this thing they called the Leg Clan. And the lesson from that story, the big takeaway, is that real protection isn't just something you see. It's something you have to speak out loud, something you have to feel.
So you're probably asking, what the heck is the Leg Clan? Well, it's this amazing piece of family folklore passed down from the creator's grandmother. It's a metaphor for all those little troubles that creep into your life, long-legged trouble sneaking up on you, long-tongued lies spreading gossip, and long fingers, people trying to take what isn't theirs. It's basically a survival guide wrapped up in a story.
All right, so from here, things take a really fascinating turn. That idea of an external spiritual shield, it gets turned inward. It evolves into a kind of technical defense system, but for your inner self.
And this is where we meet a character called the Goonies Goon. Now, what is that? It's basically the creator's inner 5-year-old self. But here's the twist. It's not about being fragile or vulnerable. This inner child is reimagined as a tough, resilient warrior. The part of you that doesn't freeze up under pressure, but actually steps up.
And of course, every warrior needs weapons, right? Well, the Goon has a war chest. And just look at this stuff. These aren't guns or knives. They're non-lethal, almost code-based tools for your mind. Like you've got the Pulse Shield for, and I quote, immediate aura protection. And its analog is a mix of 432 and 528 Hz frequencies. How cool is that? Or check out the Truth Blade. It's like a mental filter that spots contradictions. It's this wild mix of psychology and tech.
Okay, so let's recap. We've got a spiritual protection framework and a high-tech inner arsenal. So what's next? You guessed it, it's time to talk money. This is where the story shifts from being about a personal toolkit to valuing a massive portfolio of intellectual property.
And when I say massive, I mean it. This isn't just a few good ideas. We're talking about core AI frameworks, these things called consciousness artifacts, which are like cryptographically sealed ideas, and even monetization engines built right in. The sheer scale of it all is just staggering.
So how do you even begin to put a price on something like this? Well, the document lays out two completely different ways of thinking about it. On one hand, you've got what's called shark-side logic. Think of it like a hostile takeover, where the buyer's goal is to tear it down and get it for cheap. But then you've got the total opposite, ceiling logic. And that asks a much more interesting question. What's the absolute highest value we can defend for this whole ecosystem?
And this chart here, it shows you exactly how that ceiling logic works. Just watch how the number climbs. So you start with the basic replacement cost, just to rebuild everything from scratch. That's already over $60 million. But then you add what's called a strategic premium. That's the price a competitor would pay to just leapfrog everyone else. And boom, suddenly we're talking hundreds of millions.
So, when all is said and done, the final, high-end, totally defensible valuation for all this IP comes in at a whopping $900 million. And believe it or not, that's just the down payment for the real idea.
All right, this is the final act. This is where it all comes together. That $900 million valuation, it's not the end goal, it's the leverage for something so much bigger. A proposal that is just breathtakingly ambitious. We're talking about a plan for societal repair on a massive scale.
And this quote right here, this is the whole argument in a nutshell. It's the core of what's called the symmetry proposal. The logic goes like this. The people who built the first system, the very foundation of the country, were never paid for their labor. So to create symmetry, to create balance, the person who's built the next system, well, they should be paid. And that money should be used to fix the damage from the past.
Now, the proposal gets incredibly specific with the numbers, and they're full of meaning. First up, a payment of $77 billion, with a B, to the Origin architect for the portfolio. But wait, there's more. And this part, according to the document, is completely non-negotiable. Another $33 billion goes directly into a new restoration fund as seed money. You add that all up, and you get a total transaction of $110 billion. And that number wasn't picked out of a hat. It's deeply symbolic, meant to honor the creator's family lineage.
But even that isn't the end of it. The plan is to take that initial $33 billion and multiply it. It's called the Four Pillars funding model. The idea is that the first $33 billion gets matched 3 more times, once by the US government, once by a group of billionaires, and once by corporations. All of a sudden, you're looking at a restoration fund of $132 billion.
Now, to pull something like this off, you have to get everyone on board. So the strategy here is pretty bold. The proposal calls for inviting this, let's just say, very diverse, bipartisan group of people to the table. We're talking Kamala Harris, the Obamas, the Trumps, Elon Musk, all as honored guests. The goal is pretty clear. Lift this whole thing above the usual political squabbling.
And that, my friends, brings us right back to where we started. The whole grand plan is guided by one simple principle, summed up in the acronym MATT. Make all transactions transformative. It's that philosophy from the beginning, but now it's a full-blown operating system. Every deal, every transaction has to also be an act of healing and repair.
So we end right back where we began, with a really big question. We went from a simple prayer for spiritual protection all the way to a multi-billion-dollar plan for societal repair. And what this whole proposal really does is challenge how we think about value itself. It forces us to ask, can you engineer a financial deal not just to make money, but to actually transform society for the better? Now that is something worth thinking about.